Hi and welcome. I am going to introduce to you one of our theme flights that we're doing to kick off 2021 for the winter. This is a Winemaker's Top Picks from our curated clean wine collection. So there's 5 wines on this, so this is a step up from what we've had on the guest flights on the menu, and this is just for a short period of time. Something to kind of reward those of you that are coming out during the winter time that are really focused on what we have to offer here in terms of the wines. These wines are 5 top picks that I just find really interesting, fascinating, intriguing, and for a number of different reasons. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to focus on them and share them with you. Now, there's other great wines out there and some that I love and I just can't get enough of to either sell or put on a flight, one of the two. So these are ones that I have at least for a little while. Some I have a little more of than others. But a lot of these wines are really limited production. They're from other small wineries like us around the world, but typically from wine regions that don't have the direct market clientele like we do, being outside of the DC area. A lot of these little wineries are in more remote regions, more agricultural regions or mountainous regions, and don't have access to population to support a tasting room. So they are more wholesale modeled, and if they are natural wine focused, they tend to spread their wines out amongst the world markets in little bits that are targeting natural wine stores and restaurants that really support this natural wine concept. So a lot of these are really quite hard to get, and I'm kind of excited that in some portion we have them available to you. But I say that these wines are interesting, fascinating, and intriguing for a couple of ways. One, I think they're just really good wines. Like, I really just enjoy them in and of themselves as wine. But second, there's something else to them that hits me from the winemaker side of things. One, I think, is exploring the techniques behind them, and what some of these winemakers are doing are things that I'm learning from and seeing how I can integrate into our process here at Arterra. Not necessarily for steering the entire ship of wines towards any one other direction, because I love the way that our wines currently are produced and stylistically. I think they're great, so I don't want to change everything. But as little bits and pieces and add-ons and other small lot specialty runs, there's things that can be played with, and this is my education, is trying these different wines. So some of the fascination is coming from how it is these wines were made that was able to produce the characteristics that's in them that I find fascinating. And you put together that it's really good wine and what went into it and the overall, I think, background of these wines. So I always talk about wine being a reflection of all the energetics associated with it, all the people that interact with it, the place, the land, everything about it. So everything that was around these vines and grapes and wines throughout their life, that energy is in them. And in some ways I feel like these wines like really kind of, connect to my heart, soul feeling type of thing, because I can kind of understand the mindset and approach that some of these people have and the challenges that they have doing things the way that they do and the rewards that they get from doing this the way that they do. So it's not just quality and it's not just technique, but there's something a little bit more that resonates with me, especially about some of the wines on this flight. So I've got 5 of them here, 2 whites, an orange amber wine, and 2 reds. So I'm gonna go 1 through 5 relatively quickly and introduce them to you so that you have an idea of what they're about. First one that we're gonna have is going to be a white. It is called, winery is Christina. It is Gruner Veltliner, and this is from Austria. And I've been really excited about Austrian wines and Spanish wines and Georgian wines, and those are kind of like the top places that I've been looking at for quite a while lately. So this one is coming from Austria one of my favorite regions that has kind of that like cooler climate to it and get some like really like crisp, vivid characteristics in wine simultaneously with like complexity and depth. And some of that complexity and depth is going to be coming from the natural winemaking approaches. So I think that richer, broader, rounder palate profile, that added texture coming from native yeasts, I think there's a good bit of that to it. But quite often in wine, I mean, if you find bright, you find lean. And these can be both bright, fresh, with great complexity, flavors and characteristics to them. So Gruner Veltliner originates in Austria, right at home there, produces these lovely, refreshing whites. This is one wine that I think stylistically isn't too far divergent from what we do here at Arterra. But is one that, quite honestly, I love every bit as good as the wines that I'm producing, which I don't, sorry to say, always feel that way. But all these really match that. And this one is got an interesting feature to it that it is an unfiltered wine, so it's got really just the tiniest bit of sediment down in the bottom of the bottle. But I'm fascinated by these wines that are bottled unfiltered that still have residual malic acid in them, because anybody in the wine industry is taught if there's residual malic acid, it could continue to re-ferment with a malolactic fermentation in the bottle, and it could get cloudy, and it could get bubbly, and it can get off aromas, and all these bad things can happen. But I'm finding more and more and more of these natural winemakers that are bottling them unfiltered with that malic acid in there, and everything seems just fine. So that's in my head a lot going forward with things. But I just find this like a great, fresh, flavorful wine. Really, really nice. Second one that I have here is, like I was saying, goes over to Spain. This one you can't tell much by looking at the front of the bottle there. All the information wraps around the back side of the bottle, and I'm sure you can't read it. But it is Vinyes Singulars in Spain. It's in Catalonia, I believe. And it is a single vineyard wine called Salinar Vineyard. And I'm sure I'm going to pronounce this varietal name wrong, but it's Xarello. It's spelled with an X, X-A-R-E-L, period, L-O, Xarello. I'm sure I don't say it right. Anyhow, it's a traditional, I believe, indigenous varietal in Spain, in Catalonia, and is often used in Spanish cavas, so their version of champagne, sparkling wines. So this is one that is produced with zero sulfite, and I understand it to be a minimally handled wine, similar to our first zero sulfite Chardonnay that's coming out would have been produced likely in a larger neutral oak container, stayed on its heavy lees or heavy sediment after fermentation, never racked, moved, handled, goes straight into a bottle using the natural antioxidant characteristics. Now, I'll tell you straight up, I've had a lot of not so good wines that are made with zero sulfite. There's not actually that many wines that are truly made with no sulfite added, but of the ones that I've had, sometimes it's not so good. This one really comes through really quite nicely. You get all that depth, round, rich characteristic to it, softness to it, some like tropical fruit flavors come through to it. Does not have this degradation or deterioration from oxygen exposure, so it's not flabby and browned and all those bad things. It's got the integrity that I look for in presenting a wine with all those interesting benefits and attributes of ultra minimalist techniques in winemaking. Next one, super fascinating. Metamorphica. The winery is actually called Costador, and Metamorphica is his brand or concept, and this one is Sumal Blanc Bressat, of which Bressat is a confusing word for me. I understand it to mean raw, but I'm really not sure like where else that term is ever used. And so this one is probably currently one of my all-time favorite wines. Super hard to get much, barely any of, and we have some to hopefully last a month or two or whatever it is on this flight. We'll see how it goes. So this is a skin contact orange wine. And this is a producer that's doing kind of two really interesting things. Pushing the limits with skin contacts. Each year he seems to go a little bit longer. I'm under the belief that this one was about 6 weeks skin contact, and he's up now to standard more around 13 weeks skin contact, and that time picks up a little more oxygen exposure and extraction from the skins, and you get like a deeper coppery, bronzy color to the wines. That amber color kind of comes out in the wines. Great flavors come out, really interesting. How to describe them, I really don't even know how to describe them. But to me, one of the best amber orange wines that I've had. Now, what's fascinating about this is that they're made in big clay amphora. So his are up to 3,500 liters, so big. And so you're up on ladders and stuff if you're going to be working in them. I think their first few maybe came from having found them at older sites, dug them up and moved them. And since then they've started to have some made as they increase their production, which they're a relatively new winery, very small, but big clay amphora. And Metamorphica is his way of describing that this wine represents the evolution, the life of the wine. So he describes it as the life of the wine starts with the vine in the clay in the vineyard. Then it ferments in the clay amphora, and then it is bottled and moved around the world to you in this clay bottle. So it is the evolution of the life of the wine through this clay media. So clay soil, clay amphora for fermentation and aging, clay bottle bringing it to you. It's a really terroir-driven winery, really showing what that site is all about. So that's also in Catalonia, Spain. I think that hot, dry, warm Spanish sun ripening conditions can get them that extra gold character in the fruit, a little bit of a bronzing, coppery color on the fruit that extracts, but that long skin contact and the play with oxygen, really, really low sulfites in the wine, really brings out interesting characteristics and features. Moving on. Next. This is Schmelzer Zweigelt, and this is a Austrian varietal. This is an Austrian wine, and it is in some ways maybe a little bit bolder, bigger than a lot of Zweigelt's. Deep, dark purple, rich color characteristics come through. And this is also fascinating to me because it is a zero sulfite red wine, and honestly most zero sulfite red wines I've had have not been good. This one is really good, and so I believe this one is produced in stainless steel and has tiniest bit of sediment in the bottom of the bottle. Theirs actually says on it, unfiltered, shake it up. And it is bottled with a screw cap on top. I think that's really helping the long-term aging of the wine produced with the zero sulfite, because this is already a 2015. So this has got that like vivid, dark, rich, concentrated purple character that I'd associate with like our Petit Verdot and Tannats, that type of thing, and has a bright, fresh edge to it that kind of comes along with Austria and Zweigelt. Amazing flavor to it, a little different flavor than you might be used to in some grapes, but that's what's interesting about grapes from around the world. Sometimes they have a little different flavor to them, but I absolutely love this wine. All right, last one. You may have seen here a few times over the years already, Saakvari Cellars. This is actually a newer winery in Georgia and Eastern Europe. I think 2013 was actually their first vintage, but don't hold me to that. So they are newer, and they are bottle aging a lot of things prior to release. So this is, right now I'm holding a 2014 Saakvari. So this is in Kakheti, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, in Georgia. So this is Eastern Georgia growing region. And again, this is one of the birthplace regions of wine. So this is made with traditional technique, which means red grapes are going into the kivery, which is big clay amphora buried in the ground, and they ferment on those skins. And after fermentation, a slate lid's put on top to close it, and more earth is packed over that as the seal to the wine, and then it sits untouched until it gets ready to come out to be bottled. In ancient times, it would have been open for, again, the family or the community to drink it. Now it gets open to be bottled, and I'm assuming that we're bottling with some more modern techniques like nitrogen to have oxygen avoidance so that we can improve the lifespan and aging of the wines once they're bottled, and that's a big difference from the ageability of ancient wines. But ancient wines minus years of maturation would have had the characteristics that are in this wine, which is this like deep, dark purple, extracted, bold, impressive, like big red, flavorful wine. So this is one of those that proves to me that ancient wines could have been absolutely amazing based on this being made in the traditional techniques that go back thousands of years in this part of the country. So this is the one that I will say to you, if you want a big, bold, powerful red wine, that's what this is. So it's up there in the category of Tannat and maybe then some intensity, tannin, grip to it. So big, bold wine. So that's what I have for this flight. Once these dwindle down, there might be some replacements over the course of time, or we'll go back into a smaller list of guest wines, but we really just wanted to offer some cool, interesting, different, more in-depth things to you this wintertime to reward those of you guys that are venturing out to come see us. So thanks.